Welcome in, everybody. We are so excited to be here with you today and to chat with you. We have a special guest, and I'm going to turn the mic over to Stephanie and let her introduce our special guest and tell you a little bit about her.
I'm so excited about our special guest. I love Kristen, who's joining us today in the middle of her busy workday. I've been working with Kristen for 6 or 7 years, and I have been greatly inspired by her and her story, and she's one of the fiercest, most brave women I've had the honor of working with, and for a lot of reasons that I'll let her share if she cares to. But I'm really excited to have her on our podcast today because she's not only a student of mine, but she's also a friend of mine. And I know that she has had a pretty intimate experience with the performance side of just the anxiety side of performing, and as well as the dedication that is required to be doing music in any capacity. And I just kind of wanted to hear from her. She was one of the first people that came to mind when Ashley and I were talking about who we wanted to interview student-wise, because I feel like Kristen puts into words so many things that I hear so many of my students say on repeat all the time. And I'm like, oh, if only people could hear like that they're not the only ones that feel this way. I feel like it would be so liberating, you know? But before we ask some specific questions, I'd love to just hear from you, Kristen, about like, what do you care to share about your backstory, professionally or otherwise, before we jump into our journal prompt today?
Well, thank you, Stephanie and Ashley, for having me today. It's very sweet of you both. And you said all these nice things that I echo completely. So we are friends, and you're also an amazing teacher. And thank you for taking me and all your students on, a really important journey of music, which I think is something that I'm at least very thankful for to have back in my life. And I think if folks have the ability to do it, it really is a great asset, I think, to just, your brain development, your sort of emotional development and well-being, at least for me. My background sort of more in music, just because I think that's more, or just life stuff is more relevant, is that I was a piano student for just one very short year when I was in first grade. And then I actually ended up playing the cello for about 10 years and quit when I went to college. And it was something that I always missed. I always missed music and I wanted it back in my life. And when we moved to Oregon, my husband's mom, my mother-in-law, gave us his grandmother's piano, which we could finally fit into our home. And so, of course, my daughter, who was also in first grade, weird little, irony there, wanted to take the piano as well. And so I found Stephanie, and my daughter Emma began taking lessons. And I think I soon followed, just because we were going through a lot in our family at the time. And I was just going through a lot of medical issues and kind of trying to deal with those myself. And I had young kids. And so I don't know, I think my musical journey kind of started with me wanting, some ability to kind of tap into that aspect of myself and realizing that life is short. And I wanted to really get that back in my life, even though I had lost it for so many years. I was very old at this time, by the way. I was in my late 30s. I was at 39, 40 when I started. I think I was 40 when I started with Stephanie. So
yeah, no, that's a great backstory, and I think that it's a nice segue into talking a little bit about, since you've been working on playing and just developing your musicianship, can you honestly tell us about your last performance, and can you openly reflect on your experience? What happened? Where were you? What did it teach you? And anything else you care to share about it. We did a snippet, Ashley and I, about a week or so ago on this exact question, and we had pretty different answers because Ashley and I's journey with performing has been very up and down as well, and I know that you've already heard my story with that. But yeah, it's just a wild ride, and every performance is different, but some stick out really strongly. And I was wondering if you could just reflect on the last time that you performed that you remember, and anything else you care to share about that.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I think the last time I performed, whether this is positive or negative news, I guess it's just the news, because as Stephanie already shared, I'm pretty open, fortunately or unfortunately, about what's going on with me. So it was actually a really hard experience. It was very emotional for me. So we had a Zoom recital because of COVID. So we were unable to do a performance kind of in person. And I had bitten off this challenging piece that I really wanted to do because it was a piece that was from my childhood, where I danced to this piece when I was a ballet student. And so I just remembered loving this piece, and I wanted to play it, and I wanted to do a good job. And I think I just had all those emotions of just like childhood, you know what I mean, experiences coupled with sort of, taking me back there and bringing a lot of baggage maybe to the situation. But I wanted to do such a good job, and I sort of practiced a lot. And then we had this Zoom recital where I thought, I can't really screw this up because it's on Zoom. No one's even really there. This should be so easy because no one was in person. But it was actually still very nerve wracking. And I have an anxiety disorder anyway. So I was feeling very anxious, about doing a good job and really wanting to prove something. And I've been thinking about, when asked to kind of talk today, like, what was I trying to prove to myself or to others? And I don't know if I have the full disclosure on what that is yet for myself, but I think there was an element of me really wanting to do really well and having an expectation of myself of what that would be. And I felt like I didn't reach that expectation. And so I was very disappointed in myself. And there was a lot of tears when I, turned off the video and I muted. And, I don't think anyone felt terribly about my performance, but I did. I felt just awful. Like I had let everyone down, and I had let myself down, and I had just done this terrible job. And rationally, I mean, I don't think I did a terrible job. I think I, made some mistakes, as we all do, because we're not perfect. But I was really hard on myself, and I really had a strong emotional, reaction to not meeting what I felt were the expectations that I had set upon myself for that day.
Thank you for sharing. I wasn't at this recital, so it's really I'm touched to hear you explain it all, and I'm curious, just first of all, we've all been there. I have so many performances that are like seared into my brain, and when I close my eyes, and I mean, these are performances from like when I was a child, where I biffed it so bad that I can still go back to that place of all of that like embarrassment and pain. So I totally understand the feeling. But I'm curious, you mentioned the expectations. Were those expectations that you were aware of before you went into the performance, or were those things that were coming up like in the moment as you were playing? Or things that came up afterwards? Like, what was that timeline like?
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like for me, and maybe people are different, but I almost feel like anxiety, because I suffer from anxiety anyway, is not so much in the moment. It's such a lead up sort of emotion, right? It's something that you just almost worry about worrying. You worry about the fear, you worry about the worry, you almost worry more about the thing, the lead up to the thing than the actual thing itself. So in some ways, I think when you have all of that anxiety building and that worry building up to the moment, it's almost like a fait accompli, right? That the moment will never, you know what I'm saying, turn out the way you want, almost because you set it that way, right? You've set these kind of unrealistic expectations already about what's going to happen, or, you have in the back of your mind how it's going to be really terrible, right? So I think that was already kind of set up.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I think that I have similar experiences as well. When I feel anxiety coming on, it's like this like avalanche. I don't know if that's how you experience it, but it's interesting, and I think that what has helped me is to try to like figure out what am I so anxious about, and I think like I heard so much clarity for you when you were talking about realizing all of the things that kind of made that experience what it was. I mean, taking just the pandemic alone, I mean, it's like that has been and continues to be a very stressful, like just panic inducing season of life for everyone. On top of the fact that Zoom is stressful in its own ways, on top of the fact that, this song has so much attached to it from your childhood, on top of the fact that performing is just really nerve wracking anyway in many ways. And so I think that there's just like a lot that was in that experience that is like worth sharing, because I think when we look at our full experiences, they don't feel like, oh, I'm just bad because it didn't go well, right? Like, it's like, wait a second, this was like this giant holistic experience that makes a lot of sense in retrospect, And I think that when we can look at it like that, then all of a sudden it's like we can look at it constructively and learn from it. And like I can think of a specific time I had this performance before I was supposed to do my graduate recital, and I had to perform my graduate recital from memory like over 10 times, like from start to finish, before I felt like I was ready to actually go in and get graded on my playing. And one of those performances leading up was so horrific. I remember I just, my fingers just stopped working. Like I felt like, I mean, I barely made it through, but I did. And I remember I just finished, and I just like, I like went into the back green room, and I just started just like freaking out. And my professor came in, and she was like, you need to go out there and greet everyone and tell them thank you for coming. And I like was like, I can't do that. Like I cannot do that. I'm so ashamed. I'm so embarrassed. And I literally was going to quit and not continue with my degree because it was so mortifying. It was like just an intimate enough experience, right? Where there was just like maybe 20 people in the room, but I didn't really know any of them. And I just knew that they expected me to be great because I was getting my master's in piano performance, and I had just literally taken a giant dump all over the keyboard instead. And so I was like, I just remember that feeling of like, there's just so much shame that can be attached to those feelings, but I'm so grateful in retrospect that my professor made me go out there and thank people for coming, even though I was so like ashamed of what had happened. And in retrospect, I can see that that experience really was like a culmination of a lot of things. I had a lot going on in my life. I was under rested. I like didn't do the appropriate things I needed to do to set myself up for success. And I had a whole lot of self-growth that I still needed to do in order to like accept myself, flaws and all. So I think it's just like, I don't know, sometimes I think when we share our stories, they can help us overcome whatever we think that is holding us back. And I think that hearing other people's stories empowers other people, because we can see and hear that this is not an easy journey for people, but perseverance and dedication to the path and sticking to your why is really like why we do this in the first place, you know? And so I've always like been really impressed with you about that, which is like your fortitude, not just with music, but with everything in life. And you never candy coat it. Like you never make it seem like it's just a walk in the park, but that's what makes it inspiring, you know, because things that are meaningful are not a walk in the park. And they are a lot of work and a lot of challenge. And I like just am really grateful for your honesty and your willingness to share with us. So yeah, it's great.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I think that, you know, shame is rough, you know, and it affects all of us. I think as we get older too, as you become an adult, you sort of tailor that you have to have sort of, you know, perfection in certain levels, not perfection, but just you have to be an expert at things, right? You have to be really good at something. Just because you're an adult, you know, you should have mastered it already, right, by this point. And I think if you want to challenge that, I mean, just have kids, and then you realize like how basically you know nothing, and you need to really are constantly growing, right, as a person. And that's, you know, essentially, you know, that should be okay. You shouldn't just have to be growing and learning as a student, right, or as an elementary school child or as a young child. You should be growing and improving your whole life, and everything is sort of right helping you to move in that general direction. I think you know, anxiety and performance anxiety is just super challenging, and because you feel alone and you feel on an island and you feel like everyone else is amazing and you're not. And I think just that trying to work on that comparison narrative where we're constantly comparing to others, and also working on the expectations, right, that we sort of put on ourselves to behave a certain way, realizing that, you know, when we come to a situation, that's just the best we can give that day. And that doesn't define us, right? It doesn't make us who we are, but it's much easier said than done. So it's a
definitely lot. Yeah, I am curious. So you performed this piece, and it was deep and meaningful to you because you had this connection to your past with this piece. Are you going to keep playing it, and are you going to try to perform it again, or did that performance close the chapter on that piece?
That's an interesting question. I like a challenge, as Stephanie knows, even though I struggle a lot. I think I really do like to challenge myself. So I think there's definitely a part of me that doesn't want the end to be what happened. I don't want to leave, do you know what I'm saying, that situation with that kind of mental state. I want to end this on my terms, like in a better way, you know, in a way that makes it have a resolution for me, whether that's like picking it back up again, you know what I'm saying, in a while, and sort of revisiting it and maybe performing it, maybe not. But I need to revisit that piece at some point. That piece is, I'm not done with that piece. That piece is not done with me. So I'll have to sort of address it, but I don't know in what way yet. So
I love that. I think I like to think of pieces kind of as journeys. And for me, there's pieces, I don't ever really like put a piece away like, oh, I'm never going to play that again. That's never, I'll have years where I maybe don't touch it, but then eventually I'll bring it back out again. And I think one of the benefits of that is that if you do decide to bring this piece out again in whatever capacity, whether that's just for yourself or playing it for your family or playing it for another recital, you get to start to paint a picture of a journey with this piece and not this one performance where it didn't go as you wanted it to go. And you start to kind of have a relationship with the piece. And I think when we can look at it that way, as opposed to like we build everything up to this one pinnacle performance, we have the relationship with the piece, and it gives us a chance to work on that relationship. Just like any other relationship, right? It's not going to be perfect. There's going to be challenging things about it. There's going to be things that go well, but it is that relationship that you get to keep open. And so I hope you do that, because it sounds like this piece is really meaningful for you, and it seems like you have a lot of capacity as a human and a musician, and I would love to see you grow with it, as I'm sure you will.
Yeah, thank you. I like the idea of what you're talking about as music as a journey, or a piece as a journey. I mean, I think that weirdly the piano kind of has echoed, my life journey. So I struggle with the piano just as I struggle with my life, in the same sort of up and down movement, but trying to make a general trajectory in this direction. And so I think it's like important for us as humans to realize that, and not be gentle on ourselves. And I'm the worst like person to say, because I say this stuff and then it's very hard for me to implement it. But I would say that, being gentle on ourselves and our children, so allowing them that movement to explore, just what I'm saying, and try and fail and then try again. Like, I think these are all things that we need to get comfortable doing in the piano or in any instrument, right? So that we can sort of build ourselves, not for anyone else's viewpoint, right? It's for your own, self-awareness, right? Self-improvement and self-joy, right? As opposed to what everyone else expects or wants from you.
Totally. Yeah. Stephanie, do you have anything else to add or ask?
No, I think that you put everything so beautifully, Kristen. And I am curious, just before we wrap up, with everything that we've talked about, how can you actively honor your inner artist, your authentic self, through the piano? You don't have to have an answer unless you feel comfortable sharing, but is there a way that you can actively honor yourself through this musical journey that you can think of?
It's a good question. I think for me, I need to let go of a lot of the sort of expectations that I put on myself for a particular level of play or performance or status, or right where I should be. I think I just do that in my life a lot. I'm constantly comparing myself to other women, other moms, other parents, other lawyers, other musicians. So anytime there's an opportunity for me to compare myself to someone, I do it. Sometimes consciously, sometimes I tell myself to stop, and then I still do it subconsciously because I'm so used to doing it. It's been a whole lifetime of doing it. But I think I need to get better at the piano, just like recognizing that this is for me, and this is something that that is going to be authentically me, and it's not going to look like anyone else. It's not going to look like anyone else's journey but mine, and I need to not compare it to anyone else. Like, oh, I'm not as good as that person and she's younger than I am, or I'm not as good as that person and they're prettier than I am. Like, it doesn't matter at all, right? It really doesn't. And I need to get over that, for lack of a better word. But I think the best way of getting over it is just recognizing it, right? And just not letting it dominate my thinking or my actions, right? Just acknowledging that it's in the room and then just kind of moving on, as opposed to letting that narrative, giving it light, right? Giving it light that it owns the room and owns the situation. So I'm definitely working on that. But as Stephanie can tell you, I'm a work in progress, and we do a lot of therapy at the piano, I would say, of just like talking about life and everything that's going on. You're not playing in a vacuum. And so your musical, your practices, your rehearsals, your performances, none of that is in a vacuum either. So I just think like I have to keep reminding myself of that.
You just dropped so much wisdom. I love it. That was awesome, Kristen. I totally agree. And I think on the topic of getting over it, it's like you just are always going through it, right? Like, I don't know that we get to a point where we're like perfect at not comparing ourselves to others. But like you said, it comes up and sometimes you're conscious of it and you can remind yourself, and that's a win. That's a step in the right direction, and that's awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us today. And thank you for sharing your story and your journey. It was really awesome to get to know you a little bit. and to hear from you. And I know that our listeners are going to resonate with lots of things that you said. So if you're listening and you like this episode, go ahead and screenshot it and share it on social media. That would really help us out, or give us a rating. Say hello to Kristen, and we'll talk to you later.
Thanks,
Happy practicing,
Kristen.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.